Hello, everybody.
How's it going, everybody? It is Friday, February 12th, and this is In Case You Missed American History. And if you are watching this, that means you couldn't come to class today, but hopefully you are well and those around you are well. And hopefully you are getting ready to enjoy something as much as that puppy is loving that piece of pizza. Friday night is pizza night at the Seep household, and I'm not going to lie to you, I'm looking forward to chowing down this evening after a week of eating relatively healthy. Crazy. All right, so I'm going to run you guys through everything that you may have missed today, little ins and outs, what we talked about, and things like that. So obviously the things you're going to miss out on today, we talked trivia a little bit. We always do trivia. You know that if you come to class, we do trivia. And then we talked a little bit about some questions people had about coming back to school. Answered those the best I could. So if you have any questions like that, please feel free to reach out to me. Let me know. If I don't know the answer, I will try my best to find it for you. Okay? All right. So basically the recap, keep working on that Decade That Roared homework that I gave you guys yesterday that's due on Wednesday by midnight. Put a good dent in that. If you don't like doing those reading guides, that's great. But hey, man, if you do this one and you guys do it pretty well, I'll stop giving them. We'll move on. We'll do something a little bit different. But I need you guys writing good sentences with good capitalization and good grammar and good punctuation, and the world will be a happy place. Get that late work in, especially if you owe me that World War I test. I'm going to be getting myself caught up this weekend and getting everything in the grade book for you guys. There's some parent-teacher conferences on Tuesday night virtually, and I know I've got a handful of American history parents signed up, so please make sure and get yourself caught up. I want to be able to deliver good news to your families and not tell them that you're behind. So get cracking on those things. Today we're going to do is we're going to look at women's suffrage. We're going to look a little bit at the second industrial revolution that happened in the 1920s. We're not going to get to the slide on the auto industry. I got a little overexcited when I made this slide. Let's just put it that way. And anytime you have a plan for American history, you do some work on that assignment or anything you owe. And as always, if you have questions, you can come see me during my office hours every day from 1 to 1:30. You could shoot me an email. I'll get back to you. You could chat me. You can video chat me. And I would be more than happy to get to the bottom of your issue. Bye, little happy puppy. All right, so here's the title slide for the unit we're getting into. It's called the Roaring Twenties. Now, if you are looking at Google Classroom and you check your email, you'll see I actually shared this whole presentation with you, all 11 slides. So you've already got them, like the physical version of them. But if you still like taking screenshots, go ahead and do that little selective screenshot on this and you'll have it to clip into your notebooks. But there might also be some things that you want to write down, some extra things I talk about to make sure that you're actually getting the little things that you might need. Now, when we do take the test on this unit, it's going to be a combo test. It's going to be on the Roaring Twenties and the Great Depression. So we got to get through these 11 slides, and I think I've got 10 or 11 on the Great Depression, and then we move on to World War II. So the Roaring Twenties, obviously 1920 to 1929. You got some of the best and most interesting things that happen in the country, and you have the beginning of one of the worst things that happens in this country. It was a time where while things were seeming to get better for the average person, the standard of living and the lifestyle was more interesting. We had more time to do maybe some of the things that we enjoyed. It wasn't all a bowl of cherries and happiness for everybody. Definitely a time where some people's struggles became more apparent, and all the danger signs that led us toward the Great Depression happened during this time period. Now, on this slide, you've got this little film clip from a silent movie. This is actually, that actor is named Charlie Chaplin, and he was one of the biggest stars of the silent movie era. Usually, if we're in school, I guess it'll all be in here, we would kind of be doing an independent project on the 20s and the Great Depression. And I usually play like a movie on the screen while you guys are working every day. We watch a couple Charlie Chaplins. We did The Wizard of Oz last year because that's from the Great Depression, and listen to some 1920s music. And actually, a lot of people like this stuff. It's kind of cool. All right, so we're going to start off the 1920s by talking about one of the things that happens right at the start of the 20s, and that has to do with women's suffrage. Now, if you don't remember earlier, we've talked about this a couple times this year. I don't know if Mr. Place talked about this with you in 8th grade, but women's suffrage is the right to vote. So this is going to be the final step, hooray, in women finally earning the right to vote in the United States. Double hooray. Wow, we finally got our heads out of our butts long enough to figure something out. All right, so in 1868, Backtracking. About the same time that the 15th Amendment passed and men of almost every color and ethnic group were given the right to vote, the Anthony Amendment was introduced by Congress. Now, that Anthony Amendment is named after one Susan B. Anthony, who was a women's rights activist and a big believer that women should be allowed to vote. All right, it was introduced to Congress. And Congress at that time was full of just rich white dudes, and rich white dudes went, what is this again? And they read it and it said, vote shall not be denied on account of sex. Take in mind, they used the word sex back then. Gender wasn't even a thing in their minds. We'll talk about sex and gender and psychology someday. Take that when you get a little bit older. You'll like it. Okay. And those old white dudes in Congress went, well, there's a few minority dudes in Congress, but no women. And they went, no, women are irrational. They shouldn't be voting. They're not educated enough. And, there's a time of the month where they're more emotional and they're just going to vote the way their husband tells them to vote. So now women don't need the right to vote. No. So women protested and women fought the right to vote, and different groups of women fought for the right to vote. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, the NAWSA, women protested in the streets of Washington, D.C. You can see here some picketing and protesting happening. But there were 11 states that let women vote in most elections. No presidential elections, no federal elections by 1916. Almost all of those states were in the western part of the country. Because in the West, women were viewed more as equals because they held power positions and they had to work just as hard to establish the land and establish a part of the country as the men did. Now, World War I was a big turning point in this because when men went overseas to fight, women took over major jobs. Women were a major part of war production. And when men came back to the country, they were very thankful at the things the women had done. And although men took their jobs back and that often pushed women out of work, men became more like, well, look what women can do. Okay, look at these things that happened. And so shortly after the war, June 19th, 1919, the Anthony Amendment passes. And it becomes the 19th Amendment to the Constitution. Lots of 19s. Now, I'm not saying women got the right to vote as like a pat on the head. Women deserved the right to vote long before that. But the men that were in charge of Congress kind of used this and the protests and the calls for the right to vote together to go, now is the perfect time. So it was ratified in 1920 by 36 states, and women were allowed to vote in that election. Some people think that a woman named Mary Byram in Hannibal, Missouri was the first woman to vote in a presidential election. I'm not 100% sure about that one. Now, this is the interesting part. That means at this point, white men can vote, black men can vote, Latino men can vote, Asian men can vote, women can vote, nobody under 18 can vote, but also there's one other group of people that still couldn't vote. That's right, Native Americans couldn't vote yet because, well, I don't know. All right, so that doesn't happen until I believe 1924. That last group of people get the right to vote. All right, so women get the right to vote. Yay, we did something good to start off the 1920s. And we do lots of good things in the 1920s, but that's a good one. That's a big one. All right. Now, also in the 1920s, there's kind of what is known as a second industrial revolution or a second explosion in factory production and change in the way that factories do things. Okay. So in the early 1920s, that starts. And really the way it starts is they develop new techniques for making products that cause the output of factories to increase. As the output of factories increases, more things are made. As more things are made, the prices come down. Profits theoretically go up, and the pay of workers goes up too. Thumbs up. All right. And so, though the jobs may become a little more boring and a little more tedious, the average worker was going to make more money. Now, some of the things that happened within those factories that caused that production increase were the popularization of the assembly line, which Henry Ford and the Ford Motor Company get credit for, where the work is brought to the worker on a belt or by some sort of machinery, and it comes to in front of you and you do a specific part of the job. I might be the guy who puts the steering wheel in all the cars. I might be the person who tightens the lug nuts on the right driver's side tire or on the front driver's side tire, right driver's side. Depends on if you're facing the car. Okay. And so conveyor belts were used to move the things, and people did what was called specialization, where you did one particular part of the job. You got really good at it, so you could do it super fast, and we could produce lots of cars really, really quick. Okay. And toasters and vacuum cleaners and refrigerators and washers and dryers and you name it, they made it. Okay. Now, those two kinds of jobs still do exist today, although they're a little bit lower supplied because in some places they've got like robot arms that do things like tighten the lug nuts on the tires and things. But at this point, for a lot of people with lower education standards and immigrants coming into the country, this factory work became a way to make money, and jobs were seen as I'm not going to say easy because they were repetitive and boring, but when you got really good at doing that one job, you were good at it. Okay. Now, obviously, there's a benefit to workers and all this. Yes, the job is boring. Yes, it is long. Yes, it is repetitive. But the pay increase was pretty great. Now, these numbers are the average white male. Okay, I'll give you a ballpark number on the average other groups. All right. So in 1900, the average white male working in a factory made about $418 a year. That is roughly like $7.70. I didn't do the math. It's seven. It's upper. It's getting close to $8 a month. No. $8 a week. I'm an idiot. Sorry. All right. We're getting close to $8 a week. Actually, yeah, it's pretty close to $8 a week. A week. Think about paying rent and stuff like that. Okay. By 1920, that number has almost tripled. Okay. And it's $1,342 a year, which is roughly the equivalent of about $17,555 a year. Now, not good, by the way. But that's the white male. Minority males made in 1920, it's roughly about $1,000. White women, it was roughly $850 to $900, and minority women, it was $500 to $600. So obviously, you can see different groups of people got different amounts of money, and certain groups of people really got screwed over. There was no guaranteed minimum wage back then. The boss could pay you whatever they wanted to. The average factory owner was a white man. Thus, the system. Not fair, not great, definitely not equitable, but that's what people had to deal with, and that kind of sucks. All right. Now, after the war, though, there's also a change in what's getting produced. Obviously, during the war, we're making planes, we're making tanks, we're making bombs, we're making guns, we're making helmets, we're making uniforms. We don't need those anymore. Well, not like none of them, but we don't need as many. And so factories switch from making war products to making consumer goods. Those are things that individual people want and need. And we'll get into more of what those products are going to be on Monday, what kind of things we're getting cranked out in factories and things like that. So if you have any questions about anything I talked about today, make sure and ask. I got blooped. And let me know. Have a great weekend. We'll see you soon.